friends, and welcome to part 4 of the Gateway program. If you're new here, I highly recommend that you watch parts 1 through 3 by clicking this link here, as there are a lot of terms, concepts, and ideas that I'm going to talk about in this video that I've already explained in previous videos. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back and sticking with me. I really appreciate it. It's been pretty hard to make these videos because sometimes I have no idea what this paper is saying, and honestly, all of your supportive comments have been honestly amazing, and I love talking with you guys, so thanks for commenting, keep commenting, and I hope I can talk to as many of you as possible. Again, if you're new here, I'm Zayna, and this is Zayna Breaks Stuff. So as I said so many weeks ago, part 12 is called holograms, and honestly, the paper just gets super weird from here, so hold on to your hats. This section begins by saying that energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. I know we're only on the first sentence of this, but I read this and I was like, what the f am I about to read? But luckily, Itzhak Bentov is here to help. To understand holograms, Bentov says to imagine a bowl of water. Once you've done that, imagine dropping 3 pebbles into this water. Now imagine the ripples on the surface of the water start to spread out and the water is suddenly frozen. The ripples are now preserved within the ice. Then imagine that this ice is exposed to a coherent source of light, such as a laser beam. The result will be a 3-dimensional model of the pebbles floating in midair. Honestly, when I read that for the first time, I thought it was a really complicated way to describe what a hologram is because I simplified it a lot, but Bentov used a lot of words that I honestly thought were unnecessary. And today I feel like we all know what a hologram is. I mean, we've all seen Star Wars, but I thought that it was important to include because this metaphor is used for the next couple sections of the paper. In section 13, Bentov explains that if this frozen ripple sculpture were to break and crack into a million pieces, that each of those pieces could still recreate the original image if exposed to a laser. Now, this image might be fuzzy or distorted, but the point is that it would still work. The key point that Bentov is trying to make here is that in order for a hologram to exist, energy in motion must interact with energy in non-motion or at rest. In this case, the energy at rest is the ice, while the energy in motion is the laser beam, because, you know, light's a form of energy. The next section is the consciousness matrix, which is probably my favorite section so far. It builds upon this idea of holograms and energy at rest and energy in motion, saying the universe is comprised of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is in and of itself one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity, which honestly is so cool. Like, we're living in the Matrix, we're living in a hologram. According to the theories of Carl Prybram, a neuroscientist at Harvard University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram, which attunes itself to the universal hologram through energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state that we call consciousness. Okay, so apparently our minds are holograms, the universe is a hologram, and they communicate to create consciousness by energy exchange. So how does this energy exchange work? As energy passes through the various aspects of the universal hologram and is perceived by the electrostatic fields that comprise the human mind, the holographic images conveyed are projected upon the electrostatic fields of the mind and are perceived or understood to the extent that the electrostatic field is operating at a frequency and amplitude that can harmonize with and therefore read the energy carrier wave pattern passing through it. Okay, that's a lot. Let's break it down. So as energy passes through the universal hologram and encounters the electrostatic fields of the mind, the waves of both harmonize, which mean that the waves of the universe and the waves of our minds emit at the same frequency and amplitude, which allows our minds to read the energy coming from the universe, which gives us consciousness. Changes in the frequency or amplitude of the electrostatic field that comprises the human mind determines the configuration and hence the character of the holographic, which the mind projects to interpret meaning directly from the holographic transmissions of the universe. To simplify it even more, if your brain is emitting X and there's a part of the universe that's emitting X, that's the part that your brain is going to intercept and perceive and understand. But if your brain decides, oh, hey, actually, I want to emit Y today, then you're no longer going to be able to understand the X parts of the universe. You're only going to be able to understand the Y parts of the universe. So let me know in the comments if that makes sense. To continue, by taking the image that your brain just received from the universe and comparing it to your mind's own hologram, specifically your memory, your brain is able to gain consciousness. To paraphrase psychologist Keith Floyd, it might not be the brain that creates consciousness, but consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. Section 15 is the brain in phase. Wayne McDonnell, who, as a reminder, Binder is the writer of this paper, continues by explaining that Bentov states that there are a number of scientists that suspect that the brain works on a binary go, no-go system similar to digital computers. Okay, simple enough. Our brain either says do it or don't do it. I can buy into that. Computers make decisions by taking in information or data and comparing it to their own digital memory, which is similar to what humans do with our own experiences. We take in the information that we're given and we compare it to our past experiences. Both the human and computer perceive by comparison only. Bentov elaborates on this proposition, stating our whole reality is based on constantly making these comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we perceive only differences. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the brain in its holistic, non-linear, non-verbal mode of functioning acts as the primary matrix or receptor, while the left brain, in coherence with or in sync with the right brain, acts as a secondary matrix through its binary, computer-like method of functioning to screen the data further by comparison and reduce it to a discrete two-dimensional form. Okay, ladies and gents, time for another breakdown. When you're in a state of expanded consciousness, i.e. your brain has extended past your body, and or you're in the astral plane or the time-space dimension, or you're in a state of hemisync, there are so many options by this point, the right part of your brain is the part of your brain that's taking in the information from the universal hologram, while your left brain is screening it to make sense of it and give it meaning. Section 16 is evaluation. To the extent that Gateway succeeds in refining the energy matrix of the mind, it also succeeds in expanding or altering human consciousness so that it can perceive and understand the universal hologram without the intercession of the physical senses or physical sensation. Marilyn Ferguson, a founding member of the Association of Humanistic Psychology, as well as an influencer of Al Gore, wrote that the theories of Pribram and Boehm, the two university professors that I mentioned earlier, whose names I clearly cannot pronounce, appear to account for all transcendental experiences, paranormal events, and even the everyday perception oddity. She goes on to speak about Pribram, saying he is proposing an all-encompassing model that is generating considerable excitement among those intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness. His holographic model marries brain research to theoretical physics. It accounts for normal perception while simultaneously taking the paranormal and the transcendental out of the supernatural by explaining them as a part of nature. Section 17 is called self-cognition, and here McDonald talks about the differences between the human hologram and the animal hologram. Essentially, the difference is that we can duplicate aspects of ourself, project them, and reinterpret them, and that we understand that we have our own sense of self, which animals don't necessarily have. Section 18 is the time-space dimension. Here, McDonald literally decides to start with the sentence, quote, "Up to this point, our discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. Now the fun begins." Relatively simple and easy to follow is not how I would describe any part of this paper, but okay, I guess, like, say whatever you want, you're the author. Apparently, the Gateway program involves more than just interpreting the universal hologram, which is accessed within the time-space dimension as we know it. You also have to understand how and why human consciousness can transcend the limits of time and space. To do this, we have to understand what exactly time and space are and what exactly their dimension is. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force in motion. In other words, it's a measurement of change. In order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way within the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern, so that its confinement gives it the capacity for being contained at a specific location which is distinguishable from other locations, aka space. Energy that's not confined is force without limits, without dimensions, and ultimately without form. Okay, let's interpret that, because let me tell you, I had to go to a lot of people to try to figure out how to put this into understandable terms, because I didn't know what to say. Imagine you're standing in a field on a windy day. The wind above you has no obstacles in its way, and nothing that would cause it to change form, direction, speed, etc. That's basically what happens to energy in a non-confined space. Now take the wind that's on your level. You're blocking it, which causes it to bounce back off of you, changing direction and returning to its origin. Not only that, it must change shape and speed in order to do so. This is what happens to energy in a confined space. When energy isn't confined, it's a force without limits, aka infinity. And because there's nothing past infinity, It lies outside of time. This part confused me a little bit, but consider the time-related words before and after. Neither of these concepts exist when infinity is involved, thereby allowing infinity to lie outside these terms and outside the dimension of time. Infinity also lies outside of space because space implies that a specific energy form is limited to a specific location and is absent from other locations. If energy is in a state of infinity, there is no here to differentiate from a there because there's no sense of area. Imagine an infinite white space and the only thing there is you. If you're walking, you can't tell if you're actually going anywhere or if you're just staying in the same place. That's infinity. Energy in infinity is uniformly extended without limit. There's no end, no beginning, no location. It is conscious force, the fundamental primal power of existence without form, a state of infinite being. Because of all of the above, and because infinity is said to be at rest, infinity cannot generate holograms. However, infinity does retain its capacity for consciousness, as it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy and motion out in the various dimensions that make up their created universe, but cannot be perceived by consciousnesses operating in the active universe. So let's simplify that. Basically, if by some bizarre turn of events you ended up in infinity, you would be able to perceive and understand the holograms generated by other universes and dimensions. However, no one in those other universes and dimensions would be able to perceive or interpret your holograms. Talk about FOMO. This inactive infinity energy state is known as the absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe that we currently inhabit, there are a variety of dimensions that the altered or expanded consciousness can access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand its perceptual capability until it reaches the dimension of the absolute, at which point perception stops because the absolute cannot generate holograms in or of itself. Section number 19 is called Intervening Dimensions and talks about how one can access all of the dimensions between our world, the material world, and the absolute. But if you want to hear more about it, you're going to have to come back next week for part 5 of the Gateway Experience. See you then.